slain because they are Christians. Apparently, Pope Francis is asking the church to identify 21st century Martins slain only because they are Christians. This is taken from AP News by Francis de Milo, and it's taken from July 5th, 2023. Please check that in the description of this video. So, guys, have I ever mentioned that the Catholic Church is the most evil worldwide mafia ever? Have I done that before? Yes, of course I have. It's cool because now I have to explain why this thing that the Pope is doing is a very, very sad way of either brainwashing people or just washing their image, so they don't look as evil as they really are. And they are being extremely dishonest. I will ramble about that later, but I just want to quote something really quick from the article, and then I will let people go, because if not, I will never shut up about this. So, quoting, Pope Francis has set up a special commission tasked with identify those he calls the new martyrs of the 21st century, Christians who have been slain in some cases simply for attending to Mass or for helping the poor. That is an important point for later. And I have to say that it's very sad that people died because of those reasons, but I don't think that making their death something of a celebration is a good thing. All the opposite. This creates this absurd idea that Christians are being persecuted, as the Bible says. So it's the end of times, or Christians are very good, and that's why they are being persecuted. When in many, many, many cases, actually, Christians are not being persecuted. They are just being told, don't be I cannot say that word. Don't be evil. Don't persecute others. Stop persecuting other people. But, Kara, you had way more to say about this than me, and I have a long list that I will read later. So, if you want to go with this.
Oh man, I do. And I'm going to try to keep it as brief as possible. But man, reading this article, I have to say, this is probably the strangest news article I have read all week. And I read a lot of news articles. I don't know if y'all get those news alerts on your phone where it's, breaking news and it's something really random. But this was even stranger than some of those, to me anyway. And I'm not a former Catholic, so some of it probably feels strange to me just because I didn't grow up with this tradition with the saints and the martyrdom and all of that. So I can't really say this is any stranger than ritually consuming the metaphorical or literal flesh of a dead deity on a monthly basis, which we did do at my old church. So as we say in anthropology, it's not weird, it's different. But I am struck by this consistent interest in celebrating the macabre that we're seeing coming out of the Vatican. And this concept of martyrdom, I think, is especially pernicious in that it seems to be preying on the devotion and the fears about the afterlife of some of the most faithful believers. And I'm really concerned by this because it seems like it's sort of making people believe that their current life is worthless in comparison to some eternal reward that you'll get if you become a martyr. And if you're able to convince people that whatever happens to them in this life is nothing compared to eternity, you can convince people to do just about anything, even if it's against their own interests or their own survival, which seems to be what we're celebrating here. And that really feels like the height of manipulation and disrespect for people's basic humanity, and that's something that the church appears to be doing to its own followers. So I find that to be quite disturbing, and it calls into question, in my mind, the beneficence and the motivations of the church leaders who are pushing this agenda forward. So that's my initial thought on it. But Helen, what do you think?
Okay, so even as a former Catholic, I don't know what the obsession is with blood sacrifices. It's really gross. And as far as I can tell, Jesus hasn't given his approval or disapproval to his followers to becoming martyrs for him. I mean, if I was tortured and hung up on some wood to die painfully and slowly as an all-powerful deity, or I don't know, the leader of one of the biggest religions in the world, I would demand people put a stop to that. But the Catholic Church hasn't really been known to put a stop to really terrible acts. I just wanted to read this quote from the article that stuck to me, to quote the Pope. Hey, that kind of rhymed. Anyway, in a world in which it sometimes seems that evil prevails, I'm certain that the working up of this catalog, the Pope wrote in a letter, will help believers to see the reasons of life and of good by drawing inspiration of martyrs. So they had a castle and they decided they're going to, I guess, make these martyrs to saints or something along those lines. And I am like, wow, Catholic Church. This isn't going to wash the stain of you. Just letting you know that. So Kelley, did you have any other opinions about this? Oh, I'm sure you do. You got opinions.
Yeah, I got it. I think of a couple of things. Carrie, you mentioned, well, they're doing this to their own followers, right? And eventually, I mean, if they're really going to talk them into going out and being martyrs, eventually they're going to run out of followers if they don't shut up, right? That was one of my first thoughts. But to me, this is supposed to coincide with the church jubilee year in 2025 too. So this is a whole big celebration of people dying and people standing up and being killed for their beliefs. Now, it doesn't matter to me in that instance whether they're dying for a religious belief, but they're glorifying people who are being killed, and I don't have a problem. I really do have a problem with that. Is that the kind of people we want to look up to as a hero? I do understand standing up for your rights and not giving in, but this is not something that I don't think I would choose to be my hill to die on. Get it? See what I did there? So I don't know, man. It's just I don't think that martyrs deserve to be turned into heroes just because they stood up for the church. Now, I could be wrong. I don't belong to the church. I could totally be wrong, but it seems weird to me to stand up and die for something that you cannot prove even exists. So it's a really hard call for me. Teo, I know you have a whole lot to say about the Pope. I know how much you love the Pope. So what would you like to add to it?
The Pope, that little old guy who everybody adores. But before I talk about this evil piece of terrible person, let's talk about martyrhood and the harms of it. And in order to talk about that, I'm going to move a little bit from the Catholic Church, and I will mention another group of Christians. Let's talk about the Jehovah's Witnesses and their very well-known magazine, The Watchtower. Let's focus precisely in the one from May 22nd, 1994. This is an interesting magazine that you can Google, and you can see a picture of a magazine with several children who are martyrs. They are children whose parents decided, you know what, my church asked me not to give basic treatment to my children, so they should not receive basic medical treatment. And now they are martyrs. Oh, wow, look at these youngsters who decided to give their life for the Lord. Now, when we mention the reasons why the Pope wants to make people martyrs, there were two important reasons. Number one, they died while going to church. Dude, if you go to a church and there is an accident, or there is somebody puts a bomb in there and you died there, you were not fighting for your right to exercise that. You were just a victim. And the second one, oh no, they were helping the poor. Yeah, why don't we talk about people who help the poor instead of saying, no, they were helping the poor, they are automatically Christians and we have to celebrate them. And I want to mention something that Helen said. Catholic Church, we are not going to forget about this. Nobody's going to forget that you have been the main reason why there are anti-conversion laws. Nobody's going to forget the anti-homosexual acts in Uganda in 2014, the violence in Central African Republic, anti-Semitism that you have been pushing all this time, modern extremist groups, the Ku Klux Klan, I can mention the name here. Adolf Hitler, the most famous Christian of history, or what happened in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, where Catholic and Protestants were attacking each other, and a lot of murder happened in there. What about the Lord's Resistance Army? Christians who fight in the name of Christianity. What about the laws in which the Catholic Church pushes, so they are opposing reproductive rights? What about the AIDS pandemic in Africa because of Catholic ideas? What about the opposition to LGBTQ plus rights? And I had way much more to talk about that, but I want to make this shorter. I'm sure that they are not going to mention this, German soldier that I just mentioned who died on his faith for some reason. And the last thing I would say, I find this dishonest and disgusting because this, you can read it in the article. This is only propaganda for their 2025 Jubilee year, this wonderful year where they are expecting over 35 million pilgrims to arrive to Rome in order to celebrate and spend lots and lots of money. And this thing, oh, yeah, now we have new martyrs, is just disgusting, disgusting propaganda in order to push their, people from going there. And that makes me sick. So that's why I have such opinion of the Pope and everything that the people with him does. They do.
I knew you were going to have something to say about the Pope, Teo.
Just a little thing.
Cara, you want to pick it up from there?
I would love to. I also find this just to be such a strange thing to choose to make a spectacle of. And I was doing some digging after reading this article and running across a lot of statements that were being made that have to do with this persecution complex, if you will, with, people saying, oh, persecution of Christians, it's at an all-time high and Christians are persecuted everywhere, et cetera, et cetera. And so I like when people cite their sources, and of course, none of those sites did cite their sources, but I did a little digging and I found a recent study that was done by the Pew Research Center in 2020 that looks at persecution of people for their religious views around the world. So this was a couple of years ago. And, I want to start by saying that, I think it's perfectly fine to honor people who have made sacrifices doing something honorable, doing charity, things like that. To Teo's point, I don't know whether that is necessarily the case in all of these instances, but in cases that it did happen, of course, it's respectful to honor someone who died doing something nice or someone who is a victim of senseless violence. Of course, no one deserves to be killed for having a belief that is different than whatever the mainstream belief system is where they live. And there are places in the world where that happens. And the United States is, of course, one of those places. That doesn't usually happen to Christians here, but it happens to people of other faiths or who don't have a particular faith. And it's something that happens everywhere. This isn't something that Christians have a monopoly on. And so to get back to that study, which I'll link it in the notes here, it's about harassment of religious groups. And it leads with harassment of religious groups continues to be reported in more than 90% of countries, which is a huge number. And Christians, Muslims, and Jews tend to be targeted the most. It is debatable whether Christians are experiencing the most persecution based on their faith worldwide. Looking at the numbers in this report, it shows that in terms of being persecuted by government policies and actions, Muslims are receiving the most persecution on the basis of their faith. Christians are neck and neck with them in receiving social persecution or persecution by other individuals, and Jews usually come in third in the places that were studied. But what I found interesting about this was that this report shows that Christians are facing the most persecution in the Middle East and North Africa. These are places where there is intense pressure against deconverting from other mainstream religions that are there. And as Christianity is a proselytizing religion, meaning that one of its major tenets is this obligation to go out and recruit new members from communities that are not currently practicing Christianity. And now here we are celebrating people who are doing this in the face of violent retribution. It's kind of interesting to me that the Pope is supporting these actions, knowing that basically people are going to be put in harm's way. It's not a surprise that this violence is occurring. Of course, it's not acceptable, but why are we celebrating and encouraging people to put themselves in danger? This seems reckless to me. So I, again, find this very disturbing to be something that we're celebrating. So that's all I've got. Helen, Kelley, you got more?
Yeah, well, as we in the former article, and other things we discuss on this show, that there are some scary, terrible things going on in the world. But it's disturbing to take inspiration to do better in the world and to your fellow human beings by glorifying martyrdom. No, hard pass. No, thank you. And I know the Catholic Church. I was there, done that, bought the T-shirt, ripped up the T-shirt. I know they're just trying to carry on their weird traditions, but like the article mentions, how the Vatican recognized 21 Coptic Orthodox workers who were the victims of Islamic terrorists. Now, it may be a nice gesture, but my memory isn't that short. And the Vatican was aligned with the SS in the past. And I feel this is a bit hypocritical because they claim that they're trying to get away from like the discrimination past, and they're all anti-Semitic, but I can't help but think that this is kind of a gesture that they're pointing to Muslims and go, look how bad they are. They're so bad, and that it feels icky because it is. And I don't really support that type of thing when you're being completely hypocritical. And also, if you are a member of the Catholic Church, you support those things. I am sorry to tell you, but that is what you're doing. You are okay with all the crap they have done. And you need to look at what kind of morals you have. Because if you're supporting this organization that has done too many things that we can't even get into in the history over the 2,000 years it's been in existence, I am very, very sorry. So if you're going to belong to any group, you better know their morals, their ethics, and what kind of people you're working with. Because to me, that was the reason why I left the church, because I found out how evil it was. And I was like, I'm done. And that was my nail in the coffin moment. And I hope other people get there, and realize how terrible this organization is. Ateo, I know that you got a few more things to say, because you and I are very passionate people about this.
Yeah, sometimes I will always have a few things to say about this guy and the evil things that they do. And I already mentioned how disgusting I think that it is, to use the death of somebody in order to make your church rich. I mean, they are experts on that. They started the tradition with a guy called Jesus Christ. Maybe you know about him. Maybe you have heard that guy. They use their death in order to become rich and the most powerful mafia in the world. And if you come to South America, you will learn about saints. Saints are other type of Catholic traditions. Every city has one, or at least every country has several of those, and they are, once again, people who died because of their religion. They consider them saints because they perform miracles and stuff like that. And once again, it's just another excuse to take money away from people. And with that, which I consider awful and one of those harms of religion and a terrible way of from them to take money from poor people, I want to mention something that Kara said about the harassment from religious people to non-religious people. Uh, if you come down to South America, you can even find anti-blasphemy laws in some places. It's awful. It's so terrible that I personally know some people who don't even show their faces in order to talk about atheism because they are afraid of losing their jobs or being harassed, being attacked, or even because of the safety of their families if they dare reveal their own faces on the internet. So yes, sadly, Christians keep being one of the biggest group harassing people. And when the Pope says, and I'm going to repeat what you said, something about, wait, I have it in here. Oh yeah, as I said so many times, martyrs are more numerous in our time than in the first centuries. This disgusting old man not only is lying, but he's trying to hide the fact that they are the ones doing the persecution to other people who dare not to believe the same things as they do and who dare not to make them rich every single weekend. That's it, guys.
Cool. Thank you very much, Teo. That was awesome. I just wanted to point out that one of my favorite martyrs of all time, Giordano Bruno, was actually martyred by the Catholic Church. And I think we want to point out that he was not the only one as well. But this has been a great conversation. And if you would like more of the nonprofits, you can find us by clicking here.